A massive NFL move happened on Thursday, which could possibly throw a wrench in the Ravens' tight end plans, but Baltimore might have already been ahead of the game. We talk about why and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available all podcasting platforms, including video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well for 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens coverage. We're 5 days a week for you, so we got Monday through Friday, and of course we go live after every single Ravens game, after all the Ravens big news, plus sometimes on the weekends we do have some bonus episodes for you as well. With me here today is Sam Njoku of the Ravens Talk podcast. Sam, draft continues to sneak up on us, less than 3 weeks away now, although the NFL is the league that never sleeps, always hustling and bustling, always something to talk about, especially with this Baltimore Ravens ball club.
Oh, yeah. Draft is coming up. I'm pretty excited. I'm starting to delve into the draft a little bit more, get a good idea of where the Ravens will go. And, you know, if you're a Ravens team or a Ravens fan, you're pretty excited about where the Ravens are right now because they're already loaded. So they're just going to try and build upon what they've already started.
Yeah, and I think that they have a really good opportunity. Obviously, 11 draft picks. It's a lot of picks. They can obviously do a lot with those, whether even that is trading up, trading back, or just staying put. And we'll talk about that a little more as the show goes on. But Sam, we got news yesterday. This isn't Ravens related, but we can relate it back to the Ravens. Historic tight end contract alert. Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals has become the highest paid tight end in NFL history. 4 years, $76 million. And to dive a little deeper into that, you got $43 million guaranteed, and that obviously checks out to right around $19 million average per season. Now, the Ravens, Sam, their tight end room, all three of those guys, this is the last year of that deal. So this could, I'm going to just put Charlie Kohler aside for a second here, just for a second. We're going to talk about just Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Those are two guys that are going to demand big contracts. Now, I don't think that anybody is expecting Baltimore, if Mark Andrews stays on the roster, to be able to retain both of those guys next offseason. It feels like they're going to have to pick either Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely. But I think what this does do regardless is drives that price up for Andrews and for Likely. But are the Ravens ahead of the game here? Because what my situation is, Sam, is if Andrews stays on the roster, I feel like Andrews and Likely, they're going to cancel some value of each other out because they're not going to be the guy. They're not going to rack up the stats or the yards or the touchdowns or whatnot, which obviously would drive their value up. Both guys are going to get paid, and I think the McBride contract will give them a bigger payday. But are the Ravens, they're not, I guess, purposefully doing it this way, but I think by proxy, you're going to play both guys, but there is only one football to go around, and there are only so many tight end snaps to be had. Excellent
observation, Kevin. I mean, that's really where I was driving home with my thoughts on it on the show that I'll have later this week. Cheap plug. But yeah, it's a huge deal for both Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, more so for Isaiah Likely, because we know what we have with Mark Andrews. The stats have proven it, the All-Pro nods, the Pro Bowl nominations, all of that stuff. So we know what we have with Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely, Ravens fans, we know that Isaiah Likely has the potential to be a superb tight end, but the stats don't really show it. And a large part of that is because of Mark Andrews having to share minutes with Isaiah Likely, with a Charlie Kohler, and now even the wide receiver 3 in DeAndre Hopkins. So yeah, if I'm Isaiah Likely, I'm not very excited about the prospect of having Mark Andrews on the roster, to be very honest with you, if he's looking for a way to up his value come contract time. So if I'm the agent of Isaiah Likely, I'm in his ear a little bit talking about the prospect of potentially having his value drop because of Mark Andrews being on the field. But yes, as far as that McBride contract, yeah, it's huge for especially Isaiah Likely because he's a young guy. We know that he has a lot to offer this football team, if not this football team, then another football team. So yeah, he's looking at this money and he's thinking, okay, this is a chance for me this season to really show up and show out. But again, you mentioned it. Having Mark Andrews on this football team definitely limits the number of opportunities for Isaiah Likely to get catches and make big plays for his team and really drive that price up. But again, the Ravens front office knows as well as the fans do that Isaiah Likely is a huge asset, probably a top 5, top 10 tight end in this league. So stats may not matter as much, but, contract negotiations are a little messy. And you're going to point to stats to try and find a way to drive your value. And if you don't have the stats to back up the money demands, then you might be in a situations where you're a little bit of a tug and pull back and forth with your agent and your team. So yeah, the Mark Andrews thing definitely does hinder both Andrews and Isaiah Likely as far as stats go, which leads me again to believe that before this season starts, they're going to have to make a move. You cannot have 3 tight ends without a contract. You cannot have 3 tight ends, especially the top 2 in Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, that are still prominent without having an extension going. The Ravens are doing themselves a disservice for waiting to get one of these 2 guys extended. Obviously, all eyes are likely pointing to Isaiah Likely, but time is of the essence.
We know the Ravens, Sam, they love to, or at least they like to try to get their guys under contract with those extensions, especially some of their mid-round picks that they can get not necessarily on a cheap deal, but one that I think is more team-friendly than it would have been, let's say, Likely as a career year. They did this with Broderick Washington, and obviously that really hasn't worked out. But they tried to extend Nnamdi Madubuike before his breakout season. And the whole thought process behind there is, Nnamdi gets a nice payday, but it's not the essentially almost $100 million that he got because he had the breakout season. With Likely, it makes sense to take that approach as well. But do you think that maybe he does see if that was even going on, do you think that Likely even sees this contract with McBride and says, yesterday's price is not today's price? So do you think that Likely he's looking at this and saying, well, maybe there was an offer, maybe there were discussions, maybe the Ravens have approached him about it, but now do you think his mind is essentially made up that, hey, I'm going to play out this season. He's going to get paid regardless. So I don't think it matters either which way, but it's going to be Baltimore or somewhere else. I think he's going to get a big payday regardless here. He's
going to get paid regardless, yes. But I think if the Ravens are to retain Mark Andrews, which looks like that's probably the realm we're looking at right now as far as things are going right now, then it'll just be kind of hard for the Ravens to extend Isaiah Likely while still having Mark Andrews, a prominent player who's offered a lot to your franchise, still on a roster without a contract of his own. So it doesn't make much sense for the Ravens or, even Isaiah Likely at this point to really push for a contract when you have the top tight end in your roster right now without a contract himself. So if the Ravens are in fact going to trade Mark Andrews prior to the draft or after the draft or during the draft, then I think talks going to be had about potentially extending Isaiah Likely prior to the start of the season. But if we get in the middle of the season and Isaiah Likely still hasn't had a contract and he's still working with the Mark Andrews, then it probably benefits Isaiah Likely more to wait until the end of the season. It definitely hinders the Ravens to wait this long, but I know Isaiah Likely is looking at that McBride contract saying, this is a starting point for me to get that money that I so rightfully deserve.
And I think that both of us are on the same page, Sam, that the Ravens would be foolish to keep Andrews over Likely long term. I mean, I feel like Likely is the guy that can give you a lot more production. Obviously, the longevity. He's younger. There's that whole conversation to it as well. You look at the top tight end contracts. Obviously, McBride mentioned there got $19 million per year. Travis Kelce is next at $17.1 million per year. TJ Hockenson $16.5. Kittle $15. Goddard $14.25. Mark Andrews then slots in under them at $14 million. When you're looking at a contract, you can even play the game for both these guys, Sam, for Andrews and for Likely. I know that Andrews has gotten a lot of flack because of the Buffalo game and a lot of flack because of his playoff performance. He is still a top 5 tight end, in my opinion. He's still a really good player. He's a valuable asset to whichever team has him. How do you think it chalks up for both these guys? Do you feel like Likely and Andrews come in at 15 plus million? Do you think because of his age, Andrews gets a little less than that? It's going to depend on the years they have, obviously. But us sitting here right now at the beginning of April, how do you see it shaking out for him?
I think they're both going to get some pretty decent contracts. I would not be surprised if Isaiah Likely's the highest paid tight end in all of football come next season or close to it, just because of the way the market's set up and because of his production value and what he's able to offer your football team. Andrews a little bit older, but still, again, to your point, I still think he's a top 5 tight end. A lot of people like to make a big deal out of the postseason success, and there is some credence to that. But overall, games matter. I mean, why does week 1 and 17 not matter in regards to his performance? I think it does matter. So in my eyes, he's still a top 5 tight end. So he will get top 5 money, in my opinion. Maybe not the highest paid tight end, but certainly maybe more than what Evan Ingram was able to get this offseason. He'll command some money. Depends on the contract, especially if he doesn't get traded and he's just released without being, well, not released, but he's not re-signed after the offseason and another team's able to pick him up. The the potential for him to get a big contract increases dramatically, as opposed to being traded and maybe the team acquiring him maybe wants a little bit of a friendly contract to compensate the compensation given up for his services. So I think that as I likely will be the highest paid tight end, just because of what I assume he'll be able to do on the field this next season. And Mark Andrews still, again, top 5 tight end. He'll be able to command some money, but definitely not up there in the likes of McBride or potentially Likely.
Yeah. Look, I think it speaks to Baltimore's one, draft and development plan, and two, the fact that they have so many strong pieces on that offensive side of the ball. Now let's bring Charlie Kolar back into the picture here, Sam. Obviously, he is not going to demand nearly the contract that Likely or Andrews will, but I still think he's a very valuable piece. Are people underrating Charlie Kolar heading into this year, do you think?
They're not underrating him. It's just that the Ravens are really, really, really good at drafting tight ends. And when you're even a tight end that's probably a starting tight end in this league at the number 3 spot on the depth chart, that speaks to the Ravens' ability to, get these talented tight ends onto the football team. But yeah, I think they're underestimating him a little bit. I think Mark Andrews still being on the roster hurts Charlie Kolar as well. I think Kolar has that ability to do some things that Mark Andrews has done well. We've seen flashes of it throughout his tenure here in Baltimore. So that's another guy who may be looking at a contract. Obviously, he won't get the likes of Andrews or Likely, but he's still a tight end that could do some work. And I didn't think there would be that much of a drop-off in talent if they were to essentially switch Mark Andrews for Charlie Kolar, especially. There are some things, obviously, that Andrews does that Kolar isn't able to do. But I think because of bringing in a Hopkins in, having a Likely on the football field, Kolar could have made an impact as well, and he still could make an impact. It's just because this crowded tight end room is the way it is, you're going to overlook him, but be careful because he can make plays.
It's an incredibly deep tight end room, the best in football, in my opinion. And, the Ravens will have to make some decisions, including, do they want to maybe add a 4th tight end to their roster in the draft? Because with 11 draft picks, you're not going to take 5 corners, so you're going to have to spread out that capital. We'll talk about that in the final part of the show, but coming up in the second part of the show, an anonymous NFL executive trashed DeAndre Hopkins. We'll talk about what he said and so much more coming up next on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Ravens forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut Player of the Week is Tyler Booker. Alabama guy. I think that he's someone, look, the Ravens on the offensive line, they have their tackle situation figured out for now. They have their center. Guard position, though, that's an interesting one. So I think Tyler Booker, he's a heavy-duty guy. He's rugged. He's not necessarily the most athletic, but he conquers. And look, the Ravens, they have a big offensive line. You want to dream big on the offensive line, go big on the offensive line. Tyler Booker would be that guy for the Ravens. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Tyler Booker can do here. It's clear that our Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku still here with you on this Purple Friday edition of the show. Sam, the Ravens signed DeAndre Hopkins, 1-year deal, $5 million, worth up to $6 million. There's a little incentive for DeAndre there. I think he's a clear upgrade over Nelson Aguilar. We've had that conversation. I think that he can provide you a lot of value, not being the guy. You have him behind Zay Flowers, behind Rashod, Bateman as a number 3. I think it's a great move. One anonymous NFL executive didn't think that, however. There was an article that was put out by Mike Sando of The Athletic that was essentially running through all the AFC teams and talking about, okay, what was free agency like for this team, like for that team, and just discussing it. And there was a lot of praise about the Ronnie Stanley move for the Ravens, and Patrick Ricard was another one. But there was DeAndre Hopkins in that conversation. And an executive said he's had some injuries, but he's still a good player about Ronnie Stanley. But about Hopkins, he said, D-Hop, that doesn't do anything for me. He's just a name at this point. And everyone's like, whoa. Some people I think are like, yeah, all right, that's not the worst thing in the world. Like, it makes sense. Other people are like, hold on a second. That is disrespectful to say. Sam, we know DeAndre Hopkins is not prime DeAndre Hopkins anymore. But where are you on these comments?
I think it's crazy. I think it's insane. I think it speaks to really, what it takes to be an executive in this league sometimes. I mean, yeah, is Hopkins the same guy he was when he was in Tennessee? Obviously not. I mean, Houston, obviously not. He's not that guy, anymore. But he doesn't need to be that guy. He doesn't have to be this huge prima donna number one wide receiver. He just needs to be the guy who's able to convert third downs, extend plays and be where he needs to be when Lamar Jackson's scrambling to make a play with his legs. And that's something that the Ravens haven't really had outside of Zay Flowers, really. And Rashod Bateman's starting to become that guy last season. And now you add another guy in Hopkins who's able to do that. We've seen him able to do that throughout his career. Even in this time in Kansas City, he's able to do that. So I don't understand the knock on him. If you're wondering if he's going to be that guy that he was all those years ago, no, obviously not. But to say that he's just a name is not true at all. I mean, his catch radius is still there. His propensity to be able to sit in the zone and be able to wait for his quarterback to make that throw is still there. And he's going to be a problem for this offense and for opposing defenses to figure out, because when you have Zay Flowers, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Rashod Bateman, you have Isaiah Likely, potentially Mark Andrews as well with Derrick Henry. That's just another problem to have. You can't just be comfortable just keeping any normal guy on Hopkins. You make sure that guy is a veteran who understands the way he plays and is able to make a play on the ball potentially. But yeah, it's insane to think that you would say he's just another guy. He's not a wide receiver 1, obviously, but to have that type of value at wide receiver 3 is crazy. I think this is going to be another example, along with the Derrick Henry last year, where people are underestimating the acquisition and their rule of the day come playoff time.
We know the Ravens have a track record of revitalizing careers of veterans who maybe don't look the same for a year or two. And that, again, doesn't mean that I'm expecting DeAndre to come in and look like prime Houston DeAndre Hopkins. But again, the role that he's asked to play this year, we know that he hasn't been fully healthy most, 3 of the last 4 seasons. He's had some level of an injury, even before the season started this past year. He had the injury and he had to miss some time with it. He came back, but how healthy truly was DeAndre at that point? So you're hoping with less snaps and with a more defined role and guys taking more of that off of his plate, that he'll be able to stay healthy, stay fresh, and have an opportunity to contribute a lot in this Ravens offense. But you look at that top 3, Sam, it's Flowers, Bateman, Hopkins. Ravens fans have been dreaming of something like this for years, and 2 of them homegrown, by the way, which that's an even different conversation about how hard it has been for Baltimore to find that guy through the draft. I mean, where are you on this wide receiver room and just kind of thinking about how through all of the years of this franchise and, trying to find multiple great wide receivers it wants to put on this team? They've had one here, one there, they've had some sprinkled in. But, I mean, this is, I think, the deepest wide receiver room they have ever had.
It's about time. I mean, I've wasted 10, 12 years of my existence as an analyst of this team waiting for them to make moves like this. And who knew it would happen via draft? I mean, for a long time, I thought it would have to be done via free agency because the Ravens just miss after miss on these wide receivers. Or maybe even they hit on the wide receiver, but it's just not the right situation without the right quarterback. Finally, you have a quarterback and receivers that you can count on. And now we're thinking about what are the Ravens are going to do when Zay Flowers' contract comes up. The Ravens are going to try to keep him. Rashod Bateman already outplayed his contract last season. So that's going to look like? And then you have a guy like DeAndre Hopkins coming in to solidify that room. Yeah, this room is loaded. I mean, you'd like to have some more speed on the outside. Maybe you get that with Tez Walker, and you might have something there. We'll see what happens this next season. But for the most part, this offense is it's loaded. I mean, there's really no holes to be had on this receiver room, or especially not the tight end room either. I mean, good Lord, especially the running back room as well. I mean, skill positions are set in stone for the Ravens. They're probably going to try and add some depth pieces via draft, but that's just the way it goes in the NFL. But yeah, it's a good problem to have with Baltimore, and it's a long time coming.
Right now, I think you have 5 guys currently with Flowers, Bateman, Hopkins, Tylan Wallace, and Tez Walker. I always like the whole 6th wide receiver thing, where 5 is a little too little, 7 is a little, just a little too much. If you're keeping 6, would you rather it be another vet, or do you think they're going to look at the draft? There's even a potential. I know people don't necessarily like it, but they could draft a wide receiver in the 1st round again if there's a guy that they like enough. I wouldn't do it personally, but it is an option. Do you feel like the draft is going to be where they add that 6th wide receiver, or do you think that maybe they do try to bring in another vet, or kind of like what we talked about last week, could it be a surprise Nelson Aguilar that comes back or a vet of that stature?
It could be. I think don't count out the chance of Nelson Aguilar coming back. I mean, I know a lot of fans aren't very happy with the way he performed in 2024 comparative to his way he performed in 2023. So there might be a little bit of a let's wait and see what we do via draft before making a move like that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think 5 is too little. I know the Ravens like to run the football, but you like to have 6 guys. You don't want to be in a situation again where you have Isaiah Flowers out in the playoffs and you're really lacking that explosion on the outside of your offense. And so I do expect the Ravens to make a move via free agency. We'll see what happens. Don't be surprised if they make a move in the draft. I don't expect it to be, a day 1 or day 2 pick. If they do, maybe a depth piece there, something they really like. Maybe a scout saw something from a team that no one's really looking at or talking about where they make that move. They've done it before, but I think they're pretty set here. Another vet will be great just to add some depth, but for the most part, that top 5 is really set. I like the way it looks.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that you have, again, 3 guys that can make a huge impact for you. Tylan Wallace just always seems to show up when he gets snaps. I think he's someone that definitely deserves more of them, and we'll see how he's incorporated this year. And I think Des Walker, he's probably earned a couple more as well. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but it's nice to have the depth because who knows if an injury happens, and hopefully it doesn't, but it's football, stuff happens. If an injury happens, that's another part of the DeAndre thing too, Sam, which I didn't even mention here. It's like, who do you feel more confident for is bringing Nelson back in the conversation? If Zay has to miss time, Rashod has to miss time, do you feel more confident with Nelson Aguilar being your wide receiver too? Or do you feel more confident with DeAndre Hopkins or Tylan Wallace stepping into a bigger role? I mean, I'm taking option 2 10 times out of 10.
Oh, yeah. No question about it. I mean, that's the reason why they do it. I mean, they saw what happened in the playoffs without Zay Flowers, even though I still think the Ravens could have won without Zay Flowers. Having him definitely would have helped. Having a veteran of that stature would have definitely helped them on their quest to win a championship. So, yeah, just get in some bodies, some vet pieces. If you know you can get better, this is the time to do it. The offseason is a great time to do it. So, and the Ravens are always bringing in pieces. I won't be surprised if they added to the wide receiver room in the middle of the season. They do it all the time. But, yeah, you want to get a vet in more so than anything. A draft pick would be nice just to add some depth and maybe teach a guy come up, a couple of seasons in the draft, kind of what they're doing with Tez Walker. But, if you want to win now, get a vet and try and shoot for that championship.
Deontay Johnson had a chance to be a Ravens playoff legend. He could have had the role. He could have had it all, but
could have had a job.
And now I don't think he's going to have a job ever again, although we'll see. Maybe he gets a nice little training camp contract or a midseason. The team is desperate. And it could. My prediction is he goes back to the Steelers at some point, and then you just make the ultimate chaotic wide receiver room with Wiggins, Metcalf, and Deontay Johnson. That would test. Mike Tomlin has gone through some battles and come out on the other side. I don't know if he come out on the other side of that one because that is a crazy wide receiver room if that were to happen. But we mentioned the draft here again, less than 3 weeks away. Coming up, we'll talk about what positions the Ravens should be in the market for, plus which positions they absolutely should not touch. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, talking Ravens football, talking draft. Draft is always so fun for me, Sam, because there are so many options. And look, especially with the way the Ravens contract situation is stacked up right now, you need guys on all 3 days that can contribute on rookie contracts for at least the next 4, if not 5 with the 5th-year option years. I mean, that's where your bread and butter is. Ravens have the 27th overall pick. There are a lot of conversations about should they trade up, should they trade back, should they stay put. We've had that conversation before. I think being aggressive, this is the year to do it if they want to do it. If there's a guy that particularly falls there, has your mind changed at all with the way free agency has gone on that?
No, not really. I think, free agency has really been about depth. You got Ronnie Stanley back, so that's great. You brought in the wide receiver 3. That's awesome as well. You got Patrick Ricard back. Love that. So the Ravens their roster is just loaded. I mean, they're ready to play right now, it seems, especially the way things are looking because of the comments made by John Harbaugh in regards to the offensive line. There's a good chance this could be the starting 5 you got right here going into week 1. So they don't really have to do too much. If they see a guy like you mentioned, go up there and grab him. Don't wait. You got 11 draft picks. Not all 11 guys are going to be on the football team. I mean, I would assume so. If so, then maybe some make it into practice squad or what have you. But you got a chance to really shoot for a championship with some young talent that you think could start right away. So go up there and get somebody. I'm not sure if there's a guy that is really worth jumping up to grab in the first round, unless someone falls. The Shedeur Sanders drop that many are assuming will occur. May pull some guys out, or maybe bring some guys up. So the Ravens may be in a situation where they might want to think about moving up, maybe move back for a team jumping up to get Sanders. That'll be terrible if you're a Ravens fan. But either way, the Ravens have a lot of options available to them. They're not really pressed to address any one position. I think the edge room is really one that a lot of fans are talking about, and there's some credence in that because Odafe Oweh is in the last year of his contract. Kyle Van Noy is getting up there in age, and those are your two main guys. But other than that, the Ravens are really sitting pretty to get that best player available, a spot that they love to be in.
Everybody always talks about the positions the Ravens should be in on. And, you talked about that. You also, some of those positions the Ravens should not be in on. Quarterback should not be a pick for them. That's at least one of mine. I'll throw that out there off the jump. But we can split this up. Let's first start in the first round. What are some positions the Ravens absolutely should not touch in the first round? That can be a position of need or just a position that they have too much of already and they don't need to get in on that again.
Fans are going to laugh at me when I say this, but they probably shouldn't get a running back. I know Ashton Genty is a very, special guy in my opinion, but let's be real. The Ravens are loaded at the running back position. Probably shouldn't, go out of their way to get a guy. If Genty somehow falls to 27, yeah, sure, go for it, go grab him. But that's not going to happen. And there's other guys in that realm for the Ravens to pick from. Just stay away from running back. I don't think running back is probably the area to go, as well as quarterback.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. I think tight end, you're not entertaining that unless there's a wild draft day trade and then you take Loveland or something like that. I'm not really expecting that to happen, though.
No.
Wide receiver, I actually, the mock draft I did for this week, Matthew Golden fell, so I took him just to have the conversation about it where, I don't think that's a smart use of a first-round pick. I mean, I think Golden has a lot of potential, but I just think there are other needs the Ravens have. So let's talk about needs. Sam, let's say there is a great defensive lineman, a great edge rusher, a great cornerback, and a great safety. You have that pick at 27. In that order, just list them out. In order, what's the one that you would like the Ravens to take based off their biggest need that you think they have? And what's the one that you'd be like, I'd probably take another position over that?
Man, this is very tough because I want to say corners number one, but I just don't like the idea of having another first-round corner because the situation you get what the Ravens are going to be in with Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman. I like to have a little space between positions in the first round because of the contract situation, but the Ravens could definitely use another corner. But edge is probably, for me, the number one spot for sure. Edge is a spot where I think Odafe Oweh situation, do we really know if he's going to come back next season? Do we really know if his contract is going to be worth the production that he's likely going to get the next season? So edge will be great. Interior offensive line is another one. I feel like Tyler Booker's been teetering around that, mid-20s range where the Ravens could probably take a flyer on. So that's a shot for them potentially. But the Ravens are I won't say the Ravens. I'd say John Harbaugh is very stubborn in his ways, and he sees stuff in Voorhees and Faalele that a lot of Ravens fans don't. But we'll see where he does with that. I know you talked about adding depth, but depth to me doesn't mean starting. So I don't know if they're going interior offensive line route, but I think edge is probably the way to go. So maybe edge, corner, interior offensive line. I think that's what was the other one? Was there another one that?
Yeah, just corner, safety, D line.
Yeah, safety. I don't know. Again, Kyle Hamilton, he has a huge contract coming up. So I don't know if they want to push for that safety spot. And safety is a big value pick there. Unless you got a guy like Kyle Hamilton in that safety first round spot, I don't know if you push for a safety. There is I forgot the guy's name, but there's a athletic safety that is available around that range that some people are talking about, but that's a little too dicey for me. I want somebody who knows the game, who can come in there and play, who's an athlete as well as a football player. So maybe stay away from safety in the first round. But yeah, definitely edge, interior offensive line, and corner are probably the top three spots where I think that the Ravens are likely looking at the first round.
I think another interesting conversation when it comes to the draft, Sam, is, we talked about trade up. Well, trade back is another really intriguing one as well, where it would give the Ravens more picks. They already have 11, be a lot of picks. Maybe you get a future 2026 pick, but let's say they move back from 27 to 33. They get rid of the 5th-year option and they have the first pick in the second round. Is that something you'd be on board with? They got a good deal for it, Or do you just say stick and pick at 27? It's all going to depend on the board, obviously, right? We don't know what the board is going to look like. But are you team trade back? Or are you done with that?
I'm done with trade back. I mean, how many picks do you need? You got 11 picks, EDC. No more trading back. There's no point. Maybe, as you mentioned, trade back for a 2026 pick, but I want to win a championship. I want to win it right now. So you go up there and you grab a guy. Now, if you think there are 32 players who aren't first round grade, well, 32 is kind of, that's kind of pushing it. But if you think there are 16 players in the first round that aren't worth the first round draft grade, then yeah, maybe trade back. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of good talent in the top portions of this draft, and maybe not to the depth in the positions you're looking for. But I mean, goodness gracious, trade. If you're not going to trade up for a player, if you don't like what you got at 27, trade your pick for another player. Trade your pick for a DN and some team that's probably looking for another team to look at. So I think that the Ravens need to stick to the freaking first round. Don't trade back this time. I'm done with trade backs. 2000 and 2015, all Ozzie Newsome did was trade back. Enough is enough. You trade up, you get the guy, or you sit pat at 27, and you get the guy you really want. It is what it is, but yeah, trading back, I don't think it doesn't make any sense. You got the most draft picks, tied with the most in the draft. What do you want all those picks for? You want a team picture? You want a basketball team? I don't know what you want. Just no. You stick with the guy you got that you like in the board, and you grab them. Don't trade back. Trade up, if anything. So
if you didn't get the picture, I think Sam doesn't want the Ravens to trade back. That's what I got. That's what I got from that. I don't know if that's what you were saying, Sam, but that Sam made it very clear. No trade back for the Ravens. Only trade up or stay put. Yeah, I think. Look, if they can end the draft with 9 or 10 picks, I think that's a sweet spot. You can trade up, get a guy that's falling. I think that's okay because you still do need rookie contracts. That's a very valuable asset to the Ravens. But I mean, once you start getting into this like 10, 11, 12, 13, I mean, some of these guys aren't going to make the roster. And that's just a waste of an asset. So,
exactly.
You have to figure that out. Steve Biscotti, rare appearance for Steve Biscotti. Sam spoke to Garrett Downing of BaltimoreRavens.com with John Harbaugh by his side, talked about Lamar Jackson, talked about Harbaugh's extension, and also talked about the fact that he does not care about the next 30 years. He wants to win now. It was asked about how, what's your vision for the next 30 years of Ravens football? He said, I tell you what, I don't care about the next 30 years. I want to win now. I want to win with these guys. What'd you take away from his press conference?
Steve Biscotti's a fan, just like all of us. I mean, he understands more than anybody that you have a window. Now, the Super Bowl window for the Ravens isn't close. It's not even closing. You got Lamar Jackson, who's the best player in football. I mean, you got John Harbaugh, who just extended to 3 years, so one of the best coaches in football. You got an opportunity to win every year, but man, last 2 years, 23 and 24, I don't know if there's ever been a stretch of seasons consecutively where you've had a chance to win more so than these last two. So I could definitely sense the frustration in Steve Biscotti, and I understand that. I used to attend those State of the Ravens addresses every year with Steve Biscotti. Obviously, most of those ended in losses either in the playoffs or falling short of making the postseason. So I'm used to seeing Steve Biscotti frustrated after a grueling season. But this is one of those times where you see Steve Biscotti and you can sense the urgency. You know the Ravens are close. They're very, very close. You can tell by the draft. Look at how we talked about the draft. We don't really know where the Ravens are going to go with the draft pick because they're so loaded on offense and on defense. So obviously there are some depth pieces to make maybe a position here or two where they can upgrade. But for the most part, this team is championship ready. So I understand the frustration. They don't want to think about 30 years down the line. Let's win now. The Ravens, Steve Biscotti, Eric DeCosta, and John Harbaugh, they all share the sentiment. So I like the urgency. I like the way he responded to that question because they definitely have the talent to win right now.
They do. And I think this is a time you have to maximize because after this upcoming year, there will be some change. There's not going to be a lot of change that happens this offseason. It's change for the better. But like we talked about in the first part of the show, at the tight end position, all three of those guys in the last year of their deals, you're going to have to start figuring out extensions, who's going to stay, who's going to go. So I think this is the year that you should capitalize on it. But even if it's not this year, you still have a window with Lamar Jackson. As long as Lamar's Lamar doing his thing, you will have a shot. But Sam, I appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for hopping on. Please tell people where they can find you, what you're working on.
All right. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Ravens Talk Podcast. Apple and Spotify as well. We have a new show coming out next week, recapping the free agency period and the upcoming draft. Talk all about it. A lot of stuff that we talked about today will be on the show. You can also find me on Twitter, X, at Ravenstock Pod, and Instagram at Ravenstock Pod. Currently, my TikTok is actually has been hacked, so you can't find me on YouTube, on TikTok, I should say. So don't go clicking there quite yet. But all those other platforms, you can find me. We're talking about football 24/7.
Oh, that is awful. Hopefully the TikTok gets back up soon. But in the meantime, be sure to follow Sam, all of his work, where he is not hacked, because he does great stuff. Sam, appreciate you as always, and thank you for hopping on again. And thank you to everybody who watched, listened today to Locked On Ravens. We'll be back here on Monday unless there is something crazy to talk about on the weekend for a bonus episode. So we'll take a little 2-day break. But coming up on Monday, it's more Ravens talk from us. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.